Final section then, Bruce. I assume that you're interested in punting, or is that not the case?
No, very much so. I mean, I got into racing through betting, and that passion for it has never ever left me, never at all. I mean, I just love betting. Bet most days, bet on pretty much every sport there is, and just enjoy it. I mean, I find it invigorating and adds a new sort of dimension to my life, really.
So what were your biggest successes, and people like to hear about the near misses?
I mean, I could drone on about near misses for ages, but I always find hard luck stories are some of the most boring, and people don't really want to know about them. My biggest win was Steve Palmer at Golf Tips, who's an absolutely superb judge. It's funny with Steve because I think people, remember him or look at his Sunday column and look at the kind of haphazard, slightly unorthodox way he approaches life, if you like. But as a golf tipster and as a journalist and as an operator, he's so professional, it's unbelievable. But he's a very, very good golf tipster. Anyway, obviously there's 2 tournaments most weeks, one in Europe or Asia and one in America. And I tend to do each way doubles on his selections. And I've had a couple of really good successes. One of them probably 7 or 8 years ago, he had, I think, they were big price, I can't remember the exact size. And even though I buckled and laid off a bit, it was still a decent win. So yes, I owe Steve Palmer plenty of beers still for that.
You mentioned you've got some very talented people writing and tipping for the Racing Post. A lot of punters buy the paper to be better informed, in their quest to beat the bookies. How should they feel when they eventually achieve that and then they struggle to get £20 bets on with some of the big firms that possibly even advertise with you?
Well, I mean, it's obviously a problem, and it's something that's come to light recently. I took part in a debate in Parliament recently on the subject, and my concern is that increasingly those kind of clued up but still recreational punters who might bet somewhere between £20 and £50 and who I consider to be our core audience, they're almost getting this kind of thou shalt not win philosophy from the bookmakers thrown in their face. I think, anyone who's just price matching or arbing or whatever you want to call it, I have no sympathy with them. And I also happen to take the view that I don't believe the betting industry, like any other industry, should support professional punters and should just keep writing checks to them. I just don't think that that's, realistic to expect that to happen. But what I do expect to be realistic and should happen is that, the guys who might win, say, between 3 and 7 or 8 grand by being shrewd and being selective, I don't think that their activity should be shut down as brutally as I'm hearing they are by some firms these days. So, my attitude was always, we'll try and give you the best information and the best help, the best tipsters, the best form, the best data, etc., to be able to find winners. You guys are going to have to do what you can to get on. Now, it's difficult because, in the same way that no bookmaker ever tells me how much the Racing Post should cost, do I have a right to ask or to dictate to bookmakers how they should run their businesses? But all I'm saying is that if you take away that aspiration that every punter has to become successful and to win, not life-changing amounts, but decent money, I don't think that's right. And I just think you need to establish a line where, it's fair and sensible to let good recreational punters, get a decent bet on without, I mean, in that debate, Richard Flint at Sky Bet said that they write a cheque of about £7 million to their restricted punters. So they're winning punters who they factor quite heavily. They still lose £7 million a year to them. And, if you're a Sky Bet shareholder, you could say, well, hang on a sec, why are we doing that? But, at the same time, you have to expect to lose off some people because you're winning off the majority, aren't you?
Now, we know that social media these days is something we can't get away from. We'll publicise this video on social media, and no doubt people will comment on it. Everything you do personally as a paper, because you're on social media, you're going to get people that are going to respond to you. How do you feel about it?
Well, I think you can escape it. You can quite easily escape it. You just don't go on it. Last summer, after we wrote a piece about the whip and suggesting that the whip should be banned, not because we're particularly against the whip, but because we feel that society at some point in the next 15 or 20 years is going to decide that whipping horses in the name of sport isn't acceptable. It provoked a furious reaction. I was taken aback by it, I really was. I was going away on holiday just after that happened, and there was a lot going on, and I just deleted the Twitter app, and I had 2 blissful weeks off, and so it was quite easy. But I like being on there because I feel like there's still more positivity than there is negativity, albeit I do feel that balance is changing. Yeah, it's like the Betfair Forum. I mean, when the Betfair Forum first started, it was a really fresh way for people to be able to express quite radical views, you know, and it was good, but then it turned pretty toxic quite quickly, I thought. So, you know, I haven't been anywhere near that for God knows how long, and don't miss that one iota. And it may be that Twitter will become that way sometime, in which case, you know, I might do the same again. But for the time being, I think it's a really good way of promoting what we do. It's a good way of getting interesting views from people. And like I say, largely it's a lot more beneficial for me to be on it than it is, you know, a pain. There are times where you cannot believe how kind of vitriolic or how, you know, twisted people's views of what you do can be. But, you know, there's also other times where you get criticised and you think, well, actually that's totally valid. And I mean, I'll give an example. Recently there was a race, I think it was at Ascot, and 2 horses fell at the last, and they're pretty crashing falls. Within about half an hour we put a couple of pictures up of the fall. Now we made it absolutely clear that jockeys and the horses were completely fine, but straight away the responses to that were, you know, you shouldn't put this up, this is no good, this looks terrible, look, it's too soon after the race. And I looked at that and I thought, do you know what, I agree with that. And so I got in touch with the office and said, look, just take those down. There's no value to using those. And so therefore you learn from what you were being told. But, you know, there are also other times where, and it's not so much me, but it's the staff. You know, we've got such great staff. They're passionate, they try really hard, they're knowledgeable, they're brilliant. And I don't like seeing them get slagged off on Twitter. That really does me. But, you know, that's the world we live in. And, you know, for the time being, Twitter's fine with me. There might come a time when something else comes along that might be slightly less toxic, and I'll give that a go.
Did you feel that in your position you have some sort of responsibility to answer to the public, your readership, on that sort of platform? Yeah,
I do, and I do a lot of responding to people. You know, unless someone is just downright rude or abusive or willfully wants to take issue with what I'm doing, despite logic and good sense saying otherwise, I will respond to people. It's when they become incessant or personal or abusive or just pointlessly rude that I will block or just disengage them, because there's no value in that. But like I say, if someone's got a view and they're prepared to listen and debate in the same way that I am, then I'll try and talk them round for sure, because I think it's important that, you know, people come away understanding what we do and why.
So finally, highlights and lowlights of your career so far, and that can include the early days before you became the editor.
I can't pick out highlights or lowlights, really, to be honest. I mean, look, I think when we make mistakes, that's obviously problematic, and there's been a couple of mistakes that, you know, you do have your head in your hand, and you know, they cause a lot of grief. But unfortunately, in a live publishing environment, you know, we've got a fantastically professional team of journalists, and we all do our absolute best, but very occasionally something goes wrong that, you know, goes badly wrong, and that's hideous. But I think, you know, ultimately working with such a talented team, working with such brilliant people, you know, and creating so much great content on a daily, hourly basis, it just gives me, you know, a lot of joy. I love the fact that we've made such a good, successful digital transformation, and the job has changed massively in the 10 years I've been doing it. And you know, every day brings something new and something different, and I couldn't be luckier.